Commander Vexthor stood on the bridge of his warship, watching the stars drift past the viewport. His scales gleamed under the purple lights of the command center. Behind him, his crew worked quietly at their stations. Everything was calm. Everything was under control. The Corinthian Empire had conquered 47 worlds. Vexthor had personally led missions to 12 of them. The pattern was always the same. His fleet would arrive. The enemy would see their superior weapons and surrender. Sometimes there would be a small fight, but it never lasted long. The Corinthians were too advanced, too organized, too perfect in their military strategy. Today should be no different. His tactical officer approached, bowing slightly. "Commander, we have detected a small settlement on the third planet. The locals call it New Haven, population approximately 50,000. Their technology is primitive. They have basic energy weapons and no significant orbital defenses." Vexthor nodded. "Any fleet presence?" "One patrol ship detected at the edge of the system. Small vessel, outdated design. Crew of approximately 30. Intercept it. I want to see what kind of species we are dealing with before we make contact with the planet." The Corinthian fleet moved through space, like a school of predatory fish. 3 warships, each 5 times the size of the human patrol vessel. Their weapons could tear through the small ship in seconds. Vexthor expected this would be quick. The human ship was called the Wildfire. Its captain was a man named Jake Morrison. He was 42 years old, with gray starting to show in his dark hair. When the Corinthian ship surrounded him, he sat in his command chair and studied the tactical display. "They've got us boxed in," his first officer said. She was a young woman named Amy Frost, barely 30, with red hair tied back in a tight bun. "Their weapons are charging." Jake rubbed his jaw. "Open a channel." Vexthor's face appeared on the Wildfire's main screen. He looked almost human, except for the scales covering his skin and the extra set of eyes above his primary ones. "Human vessel, you are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance is not advised." Jake leaned forward in his chair. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Terran Colonial Fleet. You are in human territory. Turn your ships around and leave, or we will be forced to respond." Vexthor's translator made a sound that might have been laughter. "Captain, you have 1 small ship. We have 3 warships. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your shields cannot stop us. I am giving you a chance to survive. Take it." Jake looked at Amy. She met his eyes and gave a small nod. They had both known this day might come. "When you sign up to patrol the frontier, you know the risks, Commander," Jake said, turning back to the screen. "I'm going to decline your generous offer." He cut the transmission. Vexthor stared at the blank screen for a moment. Did he just refuse to surrender? "Yes, Commander," his tactical officer confirmed. "That is illogical. He must know he cannot win. Perhaps the translator malfunctioned." Vexthor shook his head. "Target their weapons and engines. Disable them, but do not destroy the ship. I want to question them about their settlement." The Corinthian ships opened fire. Plasma bolts struck the Wildfire's shields, draining them rapidly. Alarms blared across the human bridge. Jake gripped his armrests as the ship shook. "Shields at 40%, Amy reported. 30, 20. All crew, this is the captain." Jake spoke into the ship-wide comm. "Abandon ship. Get to the escape pods." "That's an order." Amy didn't move. Neither did the bridge crew. "Amy, I said abandon ship." She looked at him with calm eyes. "With respect, sir, no. We all knew what we signed up for." Jake wanted to argue, but there wasn't time. The shields were gone. The next volley would tear through the hull. He made a decision that would haunt Vexthor for the rest of his life. Helm, full power to engines. Ram the flagship. The Wildfire's engines roared to life. The small ship accelerated directly at Vexthor's vessel. The Corinthian commander's eyes widened. "Evasive maneuvers," he shouted. But the flagship was too large, too slow. The Wildfire slammed into the weapon array along the ship's port side. The impact tore the human vessel apart, but it also ripped through the Corinthian ship's primary weapons. Explosions rippled across the hull. The flagship lurched sideways. Vexthor grabbed his command console to keep from falling. Alarms screamed. His crew shouted damage reports. Half of his weapons were offline. 3 decks were venting atmosphere. 17 crew members were dead. "The human ship?" he demanded. "Destroyed, Commander. All hands lost." Vexthor stared at the debris field where the Wildfire had been. "They killed themselves." "They destroyed their own ship to damage ours." "It appears so, Commander." That makes no sense. They could have surrendered. They could have escaped. Why would they throw away their lives? No one had an answer. Vexthor ordered repairs and sent a message to the Corinthian High Command. He reported that humans were technologically inferior, but showed unexpected aggression. He recommended proceeding with the invasion of New Haven, but requested additional support ships. High Command denied the request. 3 warships were more than enough to handle a primitive colony, they said. Proceed as planned. Vexthor looked at the planet rotating below them. It was a beautiful world, blue and green, covered in clouds. It looked peaceful. It looked harmless, but he kept thinking about Captain Jake Morrison. The human had looked at certain death and chosen to charge forward instead of retreat. That wasn't logical. That wasn't normal military behavior. Begin planetary assault, Vexthor ordered. But stay alert. These humans may have more surprises. His tactical officer bowed. As you command. Though I do not understand your concern, Commander. They are primitives. We are the Corinthian Empire. This will be over quickly. Vexthor said nothing. He watched the planet and wondered if that was true. Something about the way Jake Morrison had smiled before cutting the transmission bothered him. It wasn't the smile of a desperate man. It was the smile of someone who had already accepted what was coming and was at peace with it. The Corinthian fleet began its descent toward New Haven. Vexthor did not know it yet, but that moment would change everything he thought he knew about warfare, about fear, and about humanity. The bombardment started at dawn. Plasma fire rained down from orbit, striking the shield generators protecting New Haven's main settlement. Colonel Ryan Bennett watched from the command bunker as the shields flared bright blue with each impact. The generators were old, salvaged from a decommissioned cargo ship. They wouldn't last long. Ryan was 51 years old with a scarred face and gray hair cut short. He had fought in the border wars 20 years ago. He knew what it meant when the enemy had orbital superiority. It meant you were already dead. You just hadn't stopped moving yet. How long do we have? He asked. Megan Torres looked up from her console. She was the colony's chief engineer, a thin woman with dark circles under her eyes from 3 days without sleep. 4 hours. Maybe 5 if I reroute power from the eastern sector. Do it. Evacuate everyone from the eastern sector to the underground shelters. That's 8,000 people, Colonel. We don't have transport for everyone. Then they walk. Move them now. Megan nodded and started giving orders. Ryan turned to his tactical display. The Corinthian fleet had 3 warships in orbit. His own forces consisted of 200 colonial marines, 500 militia volunteers, and a handful of outdated defensive weapons. It wasn't even close to enough. The shields collapsed 2 hours later. The Corinthian dropships came down like falling stars, burning through the atmosphere. They landed in the open fields north of the city. Ramps dropped, and Corinthian soldiers marched out in perfect formation. They were tall, 7 feet on average, with scaled skin that could deflect small arms fire. They carried plasma rifles that could melt through concrete. They wore powered armor that made them stronger and faster. Each one was worth 10 human soldiers in straight combat. Ryan had no intention of fighting them straight. All units. Execute Plan Rattlesnake, he ordered. The Corinthians advanced toward the city in 3 columns. They expected resistance at the walls, but the walls were empty. They marched through the outer streets without opposition. It was too quiet, too easy. Sergeant Kyle Harris crouched in the ruins of a collapsed building, watching the enemy column pass below him. He was 28, built like a brick wall with the kind of face that looked like it had been punched a few times too many. His squad of 12 Marines waited with him, barely breathing. Hold, Kyle whispered into his comm. Let them get into the kill zone. The Corinthian column reached the town square. Buildings surrounded them on all sides. Still no resistance. Their commander ordered a halt to reassess. That was when Kyle's squad opened fire. Not at the soldiers, but at the buildings above them. Explosives detonated. Tons of rubble came crashing down onto the Corinthian formation. Soldiers were crushed or pinned. The perfect column dissolved into chaos. Kyle's Marines fired into the confusion, targeting joints in the armor. Weak points they had identified from the wildfire's sensor data before it was destroyed. 3 Corinthians went down, then 5, then 8. Fall back, Kyle ordered. His squad disappeared into the tunnels beneath the city before the enemy could organize a response. The same thing happened to all 3 columns. Ambush, casualties, retreat. The Corinthians took the city, but they paid for every block in blood. Vexthor stood in the command center of his flagship, watching casualty reports scroll across the screen. 23 dead in the first hour, 41 wounded. The humans had vanished into a network of underground passages that his sensors couldn't map. This was supposed to be a simple occupation. His second officer said, yes, it was. Vexthor studied the tactical map. These humans are not fighting like a conventional military force. They strike and disappear. They use their environment as a weapon. They sacrifice positions freely, but make us bleed for each one. They cannot win, Commander. They are outnumbered and outgunned. I know, but they are making us pay a price we did not expect. The siege settled into a brutal pattern. The Corinthians controlled the city above ground. The humans controlled the tunnels below. Every patrol was an invitation to ambush. Every secured building became a tomb when explosives detonated in the basement. Kyle's squad held a bridge for 3 days. It was a critical choke point, the only route to the eastern sector where civilians were evacuating. The Corinthians needed that bridge. Kyle's 12 Marines stood between them and 8,000 refugees. On the 3rd day, they ran out of ammunition. Kyle picked up a piece of rebar from the rubble and hefted it like a club. His squad did the same. When the Corinthians came, they fought hand to hand. Vexthor watched the battle through a drone feed. He watched human soldiers continue fighting with broken bones and bleeding wounds. He watched a human female tackle a Corinthian soldier twice her size and drive a piece of metal through the gap in his helmet. He watched Kyle Harris kill 3 Corinthians with his bare hands before plasma fire finally brought him down. The bridge fell, but the civilians had escaped. The field hospital was in the basement of what used to be a school. Nicole Graham worked there as the senior medical officer. She was 36 with blonde hair stained red from other people's blood. She had been a civilian doctor before the invasion. Now she operated on soldiers without anesthesia, because they had run out 3 days ago. The Corinthians found the hospital on day 7 of the siege. Plasma fire punched through the ceiling. Debris rained down. Nicole looked up from the soldier she was treating. "We need to evacuate," her assistant shouted. "Not yet. I can save him. We don't have time." Nicole kept working. Her hands were steady even as the building shook. She sealed the wound, injected the last of their antibiotics, and bandaged the soldier's chest. Only then did she look up. The ceiling was collapsing. Her assistant was already gone, helping patients up the stairs. Nicole started to follow, but a support beam gave way. Rubble crashed down, pinning her legs. She didn't scream. She just pulled out her comm and calmly reported the hospital's location to Ryan, so he could evacuate the patients to a backup facility. Then she kept talking, describing the condition of each patient, their treatment, what they would need. She talked until the building came down. Vexthor stood in the ruins the next day. His soldiers had found 47 humans alive in the wreckage. They had also found Nicole crushed beneath the rubble, still holding her comm. The device had recorded her final minutes. She had been calm the entire time. Professional, she had given medical reports until the moment she died. Why? Vexthor asked aloud. Why didn't she save herself? "Commander?" his officer asked. "Nothing." Vexthor turned away, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. The humans kept fighting when victory was impossible. They stayed at their posts when survival required retreat. They died for each other without hesitation. It had been 3 weeks. The Corinthians had taken the city, but they had lost 300 soldiers doing it. The humans had cost them 30% of their ground forces. That night, Vexthor filed his report to High Command. He wrote that the humans were defeated. He wrote that the colony was secured, but he also wrote a single line that his superiors would ignore. "These humans do not fight like any enemy we have previously encountered. Recommend caution in future engagements." He sent the message and looked out at the stars. News of New Haven would reach Earth soon. The humans would respond. And Vexthor wondered if the Corinthian Empire was ready for what was coming. The news reached Earth 3 weeks after New Haven fell. 50,000 colonists dead or captured. The wildfire destroyed with all hands. An alien empire on humanity's doorstep. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Admiral Brandon Cole stood in the war room looking at the fleet manifest. He was 63 years old with white hair and eyes that had seen too much combat. He had retired 5 years ago after the border wars. Now they had pulled him back for one more fight. "This is what we have," his aide said, highlighting ships on the display. 12 destroyers, 6 cruisers, 2 carriers. plus another 40 vessels from the merchant fleet that volunteered for military conversion. Brandon studied the numbers. The Corinthians have 100 warships in their empire. We've seen 3 of them, and they took New Haven. Yes, sir, but we're not trying to conquer their empire. We're trying to defend our worlds and evacuate what we can't defend. Brandon highlighted 3 colony worlds between Earth and Corinthian space. These are next in their path. We need to buy them time. Lieutenant Commander Ashley Burke entered the room. She was 34, brilliant, and had been teaching military strategy at the academy before the war started. Brandon had requested her personally. I've analyzed the combat data from New Haven, Ashley said, bringing up her report. The Corinthians fight in standard formation. They're predictable. They rely on superior firepower and technology, but they don't adapt quickly to unexpected tactics. Can we beat them? In a straight fight? No, but we don't need to fight straight. Ashley pulled up a star map. The Corinthians avoid high radiation zones and dense asteroid fields. They stick to clear space and predictable routes. We can use that, Brandon smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. Show me. Captain Lauren Hayes commanded the destroyer Valiant. She was 41 with short brown hair and a reputation for aggressive tactics. When Brandon gave her the mission, she didn't hesitate. You understand this is likely a one-way trip? Brandon asked. Yes, sir. But if we can delay them even a few days, that's 10,000 civilians evacuated from the frontier worlds. That's worth it. Lauren took her task force of 5 ships deep into the asteroid fields near the colony world of Freedom Station. The Corinthians were coming, a fleet of 8 warships escorting troop transports. They expected an easy victory, just like New Haven. Lauren waited until the Corinthian fleet entered the asteroid field. Then she struck. The human ships appeared from behind massive rocks, firing everything they had at point-blank range. One Corinthian transport exploded, then another. The enemy fleet scrambled to respond, but the asteroids limited their movement. Break and scatter, Lauren ordered. Make them chase us. Her ships separated, each one diving deeper into the asteroid field. The Corinthians followed, trying to corner them. But every time they thought they had a human ship trapped, it would slip through a gap too narrow for the larger Corinthian vessels, or it would lead them into a cluster of rocks and then accelerate away at dangerous speeds while debris damaged the pursuing ships. For 6 days, Lauren's task force played cat and mouse with the enemy. They lost 2 ships, but they destroyed 4 Corinthian transports and damaged 3 warships. More importantly, they bought time. Freedom Station evacuated completely. On the 7th day, the Valiant's engines finally gave out. Lauren stood on her bridge as Corinthian ships surrounded her. Crew to escape pods, she ordered. Her tactical officer shook his head. Pods are damaged, Captain. We're not going anywhere. Lauren looked at her crew. 23 faces looked back at her. They had known the odds when they volunteered. Then we make it count. Arm the self-destruct and set it for a 5-minute delay. When they come to board us, we give them a surprise. The Corinthians sent a boarding party to capture the human crew for questioning. The Valiant exploded just as they breached the hull, taking 2 Corinthian boarding ships with it. Vexthor watched the explosion from his command ship. He had been promoted to fleet commander after New Haven, given charge of the entire invasion force. He was supposed to be sweeping aside human resistance. Instead, he was watching his ships get destroyed by desperate tactics that made no military sense. They sacrificed themselves again, his tactical officer said. They could have surrendered. They don't surrender, Vexthor replied quietly. I am starting to understand that. High Command sent him orders to accelerate the invasion. The humans were weak, they said. Press the advantage. Take more worlds before they can organize a real defense. But Vexthor looked at his casualty reports and wondered. He had started this campaign with 12 warships.
He now had 8.
The humans had less than half his numbers, worse technology, and they were still making him pay for every light year of space. He decided to capture a human prisoner. Maybe if he understood them, he could find a weakness. The opportunity came after a skirmish near a supply convoy. A human fighter pilot named Danny Cooper ejected from his destroyed ship. Vexthor ordered him captured alive and brought to the flagship. Danny was 29 with a broken arm and burns across his face. Vexthor had him brought to a medical bay, treated, and then interviewed him personally. Why do you fight? Vexthor asked. You cannot win. Your technology is inferior. Your numbers are smaller. Why not negotiate peace? Danny looked at him with calm eyes. Because you invaded our homes. Because you killed our people. Because that's what humans do when someone threatens us. We fight. Even when you know you will die, especially then. Look, Commander, I know you think we're crazy. Maybe we are. But humans have been fighting for survival since we climbed out of caves. We've survived ice ages, diseases, natural disasters. We've fought wars against each other for thousands of years. Every generation faces something that should wipe us out, and every generation finds a way to survive. Danny leaned forward. You're not the first enemy we've faced. You won't be the last, but you will lose because we're too stubborn to quit. You believe that? Even now? I know that. Because right now, somewhere in human space, there's an engineer figuring out how to make our ships faster. There's a scientist developing better weapons. There's a captain planning a strategy you've never seen before. And there are a million regular people signing up to fight, even though they know they might die. That's what you're up against. Not our technology. Us. Vexthor had Danny sent to the prisoner hold, but the conversation stayed with him. That night he dreamed for the first time in years. Corinthians had evolved beyond dreaming millennia ago. But Vexthor dreamed anyway. He dreamed of Jake Morrison smiling before ramming the wildfire. He dreamed of Kyle Harris fighting with a piece of rebar. He dreamed of Lauren Hayes triggering her ship's self-destruct. He woke up in his quarters, breathing hard. The walls felt too close. The darkness felt full of human faces, all of them calm, all of them unafraid. For the first time in his life, Vexthor felt fear. Meanwhile, Ashley Burke stood in the Fleet Command Center with Brandon, reviewing new tactics. She had analyzed every engagement, every casualty report, every scanner reading. She was building a picture of how the Corinthians thought, how they fought, how they could be beaten. They're predictable, she told Brandon. They follow doctrine perfectly. If we show them pattern A, they respond with counter pattern A, every time. So we show them pattern A and hit them with pattern B? Exactly. We make them think they understand us, then we do something completely different. Ashley highlighted a system on the map. Here, this is where we make our stand. This is where we show them what humans can really do. Brandon looked at the star system. It was called Liberty Point, a mining colony with minimal defenses. But it had something else. Asteroid fields, radiation zones, and narrow passages between planets. It was a nightmare for conventional fleet tactics. It was perfect for humans. Send the word, Brandon said. All ships to Liberty Point. We end this. Vexthor received the intelligence report 3 days later. The human fleet was gathering at Liberty Point. All of them. Every ship they had left. It was suicide. His fleet outnumbered them 2-1. He could crush them completely. His tactical officer was excited. We can end the war in one battle, Commander. Destroy their fleet and Earth will have no choice but to surrender. Vexthor looked at the report and remembered Danny Cooper's words. He remembered the dreams. Ready the fleet, he ordered. But stay alert. The humans are gathering for a reason. The Corinthian fleet arrived at Liberty Point expecting a quick victory. Vexthor led 20 warships against the human fleet of 12 military vessels and 16 armed civilian ships. The numbers favored him heavily, but as his fleet entered the system, he felt that same creeping unease he had felt since New Haven. Scan the area, he ordered. Full spectrum. I want to know where every human ship is hiding. His sensors officer worked for several minutes. Commander, I'm reading the human fleet in standard defensive formation around the mining colony. No signs of ambush forces, that was wrong. Humans didn't fight defensively. They were aggressive, unpredictable. This felt like a trap. Advance slowly. All ships maintain formation. Watch for mines, hidden weapons, anything unusual. The Corinthian fleet moved forward carefully. The human ships waited, not moving, not firing. The distance closed to weapons range. Still nothing. Commander, his tactical officer said. They're just sitting there. Should we open fire? Vexthor studied the tactical display. The human formation was too perfect, too organized. These were the same people who had ambushed his convoys, hidden in asteroid fields and rammed ships into his fleet. They wouldn't just sit and wait to be destroyed, then he saw it. A small human ship, a converted cargo hauler, broke formation and accelerated directly toward his fleet. Not toward the flagship this time. Toward the center of his formation. Evasive action, Vexthor shouted. That ship is going to ram us. His fleet scattered, breaking their perfect formation to avoid the suicidal charge. But the cargo hauler wasn't targeting any ship. It detonated in the center of the formation and the explosion wasn't normal. It was a radiation bomb, flooding the area with deadly energy that scrambled sensors and communications. "I can't see anything," his sensors officer shouted. "All scans are blind." That was when the real attack started. Human ships poured out of the asteroid fields where they had been hiding with their engines powered down. Invisible to sensors, they hit the scattered Corinthian fleet from 3 directions at once, targeting isolated ships that couldn't coordinate with the rest of the fleet. Commander Eric Patterson led the main assault group. He was 47, a career officer who had spent 20 years studying unconventional warfare. He had developed the tactic he called swarm fighting, small ships moving in coordinated groups attacking from multiple angles, never staying still long enough to be targeted effectively. His 6 destroyers fell on a Corinthian battlecruiser like wolves on a deer. They circled it, firing at its engines, its weapons, its shield generators. When the battlecruiser tried to target one ship, the others would hit it from behind. It was death by 1,000 cuts. The battlecruiser exploded. Eric's fleet was already moving to their next target. Ashley Burke coordinated the battle from the carrier Defiant. She watched the tactical display, seeing the patterns emerge. The Corinthians were trying to regroup to restore their formation. She wouldn't let them. Group 3, target their command ship. Make them think we're going for the flagship. Group 2, prepare to hit their left flank when they move to protect the flagship. The Corinthians reacted exactly as she predicted. Vexthor ordered half his fleet to screen his flagship. The left flank weakened. Ashley's second group struck, destroying 2 more warships. "They're learning our tactics," Eric reported. "They're adapting faster than before." "Then we changed tactics again," Ashley replied. "Execute Pattern Gamma." Pattern Gamma was chaos. Every human ship acted independently, attacking targets of opportunity, refusing to form predictable patterns. It looked like disorder, but it was controlled chaos. The Corinthians kept trying to find the pattern, the formation, the strategy they could counter. There wasn't one. The battle lasted 14 hours. When it ended, both fleets were battered. The Corinthians had lost 8 warships. The humans had lost 12 ships. But the humans had evacuated the colony before the battle. They had won time and space. The Corinthians had won nothing. Vexthor sat in his command chair looking at the casualty reports. He had started this campaign with 40 ships spread across the invasion force. He now commanded 12. The humans had destroyed more than half his fleet in less than 3 months. "Request reinforcements from High Command," he ordered. "Already sent, Commander. They are questioning our tactics. Let them question. They are not the ones fighting these humans." The next engagement happened 2 weeks later. A human cruiser, the Defiant, commanded by Beth Morales, was escorting supply ships to a refugee station. Vexthor's fleet intercepted them near a station called Kepler Station. Beth was 39, an engineer who had been promoted to ship captain because they needed every qualified officer they could find. Her cruiser was old, patched together from 3 different ship classes. Half her weapons were offline for repairs. She had a crew of 93 and no chance of winning a straight fight. "All supply ships jump to safety," she ordered. "Defiant will hold them off." "Captain," her first officer protested, "we can't fight them alone. We don't need to fight them. We just need to slow them down." Beth looked at her tactical display. Kepler Station was behind them, its reactor in the process of being shut down for evacuation. The reactor was unstable, scheduled for controlled detonation in 30 minutes. Beth had a different idea. "Take us toward the station. Full speed, Captain. The Corinthians won't fire on us if we're near the station. They'll want to capture it intact. That gives us time." The Defiant limped toward Kepler Station with the Corinthian fleet in pursuit. Beth's crew worked frantically, rerouting power, fixing weapons, buying every second they could. Behind them, the supply ships jumped to safety with 20,000 refugees on board. Vexthor watched the human cruiser flee toward the station. "They are trapped. Surround the station. We will accept their surrender." But Beth had no intention of surrendering. She brought the Defiant right next to the station's reactor core. Then she overrode the safety systems and accelerated the reactor's collapse. "All hands, this is the captain. Abandon ship. You have 3 minutes to reach the escape pods." Her crew didn't argue. They had known the odds. They ran for the pods while Beth stayed at the helm, keeping the ship in position. The reactor was going to explode. If she could time it right, if she could position her ship perfectly, the blast would catch the Corinthian fleet. Vexthor saw the reactor readings too late.
Fall back!
The station is going to explode. The reactor detonated. The blast wave expanded outward, consuming Kepler Station and the Defiant. It caught 2 Corinthian battlecruisers that had moved too close, tearing them apart. 3 more ships were heavily damaged by the radiation and debris. Vexthor's ship was far enough away to survive, but he watched the explosion on his screen. He watched Beth Morales die, knowing she had timed her death to kill as many of his ships as possible. That night, the nightmares returned. Vexthor saw Beth's face in the fire. He saw Lauren Hayes triggering her self-destruct. He saw Kyle Harris fighting with broken bones. He saw Nicole Graham crushed under rubble. He saw Jake Morrison smiling. He couldn't close his eyes without seeing dead humans, and the thing that terrified him was that they all looked calm. They all looked like they had accepted their fate and were at peace with it. Danny Cooper was still in the prison hold. Vexthor went to see him, desperate to understand. "How can you accept death so easily?" Vexthor asked. "Your captain just killed herself and her entire crew to destroy 2 of my ships. How is that worth it?" Danny looked at him with those same calm eyes. "She saved 20,000 people. That's worth 93 lives. That's easy math. But she could have surrendered. She could have lived. And let those refugees die? No, that's not who we are. That's not what humans do." Danny leaned back against the wall. "You still don't get it, do you? You keep expecting us to act logically, to value our own survival above everything else. But humans don't work that way. We'll die for our families. We'll die for our friends. We'll die for complete strangers if it means giving them a chance to live. That is not rational. No, but it's human, and it's why you're losing this war." Vexthor left the prison hold. He stood in front of a window looking out at the stars. His fleet was down to 9 ships. The humans kept fighting with everything they had, every trick they could think of, every sacrifice they could make. And they were winning. Not by superior technology or numbers, by sheer stubborn refusal to give up. For the first time, Vexthor considered the possibility that the Corinthian Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had picked a fight with a species that didn't know how to quit. And now Earth was mobilizing its full industrial capacity, building more ships, training more soldiers, preparing for total war. Vexthor sent a message to High Command. "The humans are not a primitive species that can be easily conquered. They are a threat to the Empire. I recommend immediate peace negotiations." The response came back within hours. "Rejected. Victory is inevitable. Press the attack." Vexthor looked at the message for a long time. Then he looked at his casualty reports, his damaged ships, his exhausted crew. He thought about Beth Morales and Lauren Hayes and Kyle Harris and all the humans who had looked death in the face and smiled. And for the first time in his military career, Vexthor was afraid. The Corinthian High Command made their decision. The humans had to be crushed completely, permanently, in a way that would end all resistance. They committed the entire Corinthian armada to one final assault. 60 warships would descend on Earth itself. They would bombard the planet from orbit until humanity had no choice but to surrender. Vexthor received his orders with a sense of dread. He was given command of the vanguard, leading the first wave of 20 ships. Behind him would come the rest of the fleet, an unstoppable force. High Command was confident. This would end the war. Vexthor was not confident. He had fought humans for 6 months now. He knew them. They would not surrender. Even with 60 ships against them, even with Earth itself at stake, they would find a way to fight. The fleet assembled at the edge of human space. Vexthor stood on his bridge looking at the tactical display. Earth was 3 days away at maximum speed. Between them and Earth stood the last of the human fleet. Admiral Brandon Cole had gathered every ship humanity could fly. Military vessels, cargo haulers, civilian transports armed with whatever weapons could be mounted. 47 ships total. Against 60 Corinthian warships, they had no chance. Brandon knew it. His crew knew it. Every human in the fleet knew it. They assembled anyway, forming a defensive line between the Corinthian armada and Earth. "This is it," Ashley Burke said from her station. "If we lose here, they reach Earth." "Then we don't lose," Brandon replied simply. "All ships prepare for engagement. For Earth." "For Earth," 47 captains replied in unison. The battle began at the orbit of Jupiter. The Corinthian vanguard, led by Vexthor, met the human fleet in the darkness of space. Immediately, the humans did something unexpected. They split their formation into 7 independent groups, each one attacking from a different angle. "They're sacrificing formation cohesion," Vexthor's tactical officer said. "They should stay together. Their fleet is too small to divide." But Vexthor understood. The humans weren't trying to win. They were trying to buy time. Every second the vanguard was delayed meant more time for Earth to prepare orbital defenses, more time to evacuate civilians, more time to organize resistance. "All ships, engage, but stay alert for suicide runs." Captain Kevin Marshall commanded a destroyer called the Horizon. He was 53 with a quiet manner and steady hands. When he received his orders from Ashley Burke, he didn't hesitate. "Target the Corinthian command carrier. Full speed. All power to engines." His crew knew what that meant. The Horizon accelerated toward the largest ship in the Corinthian vanguard, the one coordinating the fleet's movements. Plasma fire tore into the Horizon's shields, but Kevin kept the ship on course. 30 seconds to impact, his helmsman reported. "Crew to escape pods. Everyone except bridge crew." "Sir, we're staying with you," his first officer said. Kevin smiled. "I know." The Horizon slammed into the command carrier's communications array. The explosion destroyed both ships, but it also knocked out the carrier's coordination systems. The Corinthian vanguard's perfect formation fractured into confused smaller groups. Ashley Burke watched from her flagship. "Now, all groups execute independent attacks. Target isolated ships." The human fleet swarmed over the disrupted Corinthian formation. It was chaos, exactly the environment where human tactics worked best. Eric Patterson's destroyers took down 2 Corinthian warships before they could regroup. A converted cargo hauler piloted by a civilian named Greg Henderson rammed a battlecruiser's reactor core, destroying the ship. Vexthor tried to restore order to his formation, but the humans were everywhere. They appeared from unexpected angles, struck hard, and vanished before his ships could respond. His weapons were more powerful, his shields were stronger, but none of that mattered when he couldn't predict where the next attack would come from. "Commander, the Defiance is on a collision course." Vexthor looked at his screen. A human destroyer was accelerating toward his flagship, all weapons firing. He ordered evasive maneuvers, but the human ship adjusted its course, staying on target. It was another suicide run. At the last moment, the Defiance broke off, diving under his flagship. Vexthor realized too late it was a feint. While his attention was on the Defiance, 3 other human ships had positioned themselves above his flagship. They fired everything they had at his shield generators. The shields collapsed. One of the human ships, badly damaged, rammed directly into his flagship's bridge. The impact killed half his bridge crew and left the ship drifting, unable to maneuver. Vexthor found himself in the emergency command center, watching his vanguard fall apart. 7 ships destroyed, 4 more heavily damaged. The humans were paying dearly for every kill, but they kept coming. That was when the rest of the Corinthian armada arrived. 40 fresh warships dropped out of hyperspace, weapons ready. The human fleet was already battered, exhausted, low on ammunition. This should be the end, but Brandon Cole wasn't done. "All ships fall back to Earth's orbital zone. Make them fight through the debris fields and defense platforms." The human fleet retreated, leading the Corinthians deeper into the system. The Corinthians pursued, confident in their numerical superiority. They entered Earth's orbital space and found themselves in a nightmare. Humanity had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. Every piece of space debris larger than a car had been rigged with explosives. Orbital platforms that looked damaged were actually armed. The moon had been turned into a massive weapons battery. The Corinthians flew into a trap. Explosions erupted throughout their formation. Defense platforms opened fire from concealed positions. Mines detonated. The orbital zone became a meat grinder. Stephanie Price was a Marine sergeant stationed on one of the orbital platforms. When Corinthian boarding parties breached her station, she led the defense personally. Her squad fought the invaders in the tight corridors, using every dirty trick humans had learned in 6 months of warfare. When her squad ran out of ammunition, they fought with tools, with pieces of broken equipment. With their bare hands, Stephanie killed 3 Corinthian soldiers before plasma fire burned through her armor. Her last act was to activate the station's self-destruct, taking 20 more enemies with her. All across the orbital zone, similar battles played out. Humans fought on stations, on platforms, on converted civilian structures. They fought until they ran out of ammunition. Then they rigged whatever they were defending to explode and took enemies with them when they fell. Vexthor watched from his damaged flagship as his armada was torn apart. The humans weren't winning through superior tactics or technology. They were winning through pure, unbreakable will. Every human who died took Corinthians with them. Every position lost became a death trap for the enemy. They fought like the entire species had decided that if they were going to die, they would take the Corinthians with them. The Corinthian fleet was down to 37 ships. The human fleet was nearly destroyed, reduced to 14 damaged vessels, but Earth's orbital defenses were still active. Millions of armed civilians were waiting on the surface. If the Corinthians tried to land, they would face the same grinding resistance they had faced on New Haven, but multiplied by Earth's population of billions. And behind Earth, Vexthor knew, humanity had more colonies, more resources, more people willing to fight. This wasn't a war the Corinthians could win through firepower. Every victory cost too much. Every advance required too much blood. Vexthor made a decision that would change Corinthian history. He opened a channel to High Command. "This is Commander Vexthor. I am ordering a full retreat of all Corinthian forces from human space. Commander, you do not have the authority to make that decision. Then relieve me of command, but I will not lead these ships to their destruction." Vexthor looked at Earth on his screen, that blue marble that had spawned the most terrifying species he had ever encountered. The humans cannot be conquered. Not by this fleet, not by any fleet. They will fight until every one of them is dead, and they will kill enough of us along the way that the Empire will be crippled. You are declaring defeat against a primitive species? I am recognizing reality. Classification revised. Humans are not prey. They are not predators. They are an extinction-level threat. Every engagement with them costs us more than we can afford. They adapt faster than we can counter. They accept casualties that would break any other species. They turn every defeat into a strategic delay. They weaponize their own deaths. Vexthor's voice was firm. Recommend immediate cessation of hostilities and permanent exclusion zone around all human territory. Further conflict risks the survival of the Empire. There was a long silence. Then High Command responded. Retreat is authorized. All Corinthian forces will withdraw from human space. A diplomatic mission will be sent to negotiate a ceasefire. Vexthor ordered the fleet to fall back. As his ships turned away from Earth, he watched the human fleet regroup. They were battered, bleeding, down to 14 ships out of 47. But they were still there, still ready to fight if the Corinthians came back. Brandon Cole stood on his bridge watching the enemy fleet retreat. His crew was cheering, crying, hugging each other. They had done the impossible. They had defended Earth. Ashley Burke approached Brandon.
Sir, we did it.
They're leaving. For now, Brandon said. But they'll remember this. The whole galaxy will